the untold story of Queen of Sheba and King Solomon. The story of the Queen of Sheba is often told from a biblical perspective, but her journey and motivations are often overlooked. This video delves deeper into the Queen's life, exploring her historical context, political ambitions, and the impact of her legendary visit to King Solomon. Who was she? The Queen of Sheba emerges from the mist of history as an enigmatic figure shrouded in legend. She appears in biblical, Islamic, and Ethiopian accounts, yet her true identity remains a tantalizing mystery. In the Hebrew Bible, she is unnamed, known only by her title, and hailed as a powerful and wealthy queen from the ancient land of Sheba. But who was this queen, really? Scholars have long debated whether she was a living monarch, a symbolic literary invention, or a bit of both. Some even speculate she might be based on a real ruler such as the Egyptian pharaoh Hatshepsut, a formidable female monarch whose wealth surpassed even legends like Nefertiti and Cleopatra. Others question if she existed at all, suggesting she could be purely mythological, a figure like Lilith, symbolizing a strong female threat to male authority. What we do know is that Sheba, also called Saba, was a rich kingdom of antiquity. Possible locations of her kingdom span across regions. Many historians identify Sheba with the kingdom of Saba in southern Arabia, modern Yemen, famed in antiquity as Arabia Felix for its prosperity in gold and spices. Indeed, Saba's capital at Marib in Yemen was a center of incense trade and agriculture by around the 10th century BCE. On the other hand, Ethiopian legends insist she ruled in the Horn of Africa. In Ethiopian tradition, she is given the name Makeda or Makare and said to rule the kingdom of Aksum in modern Ethiopia, Eritrea. There is even a province in Ethiopia called Shewa, Saba, hinting at ancient connections. Could it be that colonies of Saba in Africa transplanted the tale there? Some researchers theorize that Sabaean people crossed the Red Sea around the 6th century BCE, bringing the memory of their queen to Ethiopian soil. Visual fade in an ancient map overlay. One area, Arabia, Yemen, and another, Ethiopia, are highlighted with question marks. Soundtrack add a layer of inquisitive flute as we scan the map. The very mystery of her identity adds to her allure. In Islamic lore, she is called Bilqis, while medieval Jewish texts sometimes refer to her as Queen Balkis, or even link her to demonic beings. Ethiopian lore calls her Makeda. Was she a flesh and blood queen of Saba, traveling to Israel for trade and wisdom? Or a composite character, amalgamating tales of multiple powerful women? To date, no archaeological evidence has definitively revealed who the Queen of Sheba was or where she came from. She could be a composite of historical figures or entirely legendary. Even the location of Sheba is hotly debated, Arabia or Africa. Yemen's ruins and Ethiopia's highlands both claim her. This uncertainty is part of the magic. The Queen of Sheba stands at the crossroads of history and myth, inviting us to journey into the unknown in search of her story. The journey to Solomon. The most famous chapter of the Queen of Sheba's saga is her legendary visit to King Solomon in Jerusalem. 2,900 years ago, around the 10th century BCE by tradition, imagine a grand caravan making its way north from the distant lands of Sheba. Carpets of sand are stirred by camel hooves as the queen's entourage crosses deserts and mountains. She is drawn by the tales of Solomon, the son of David, a king renowned for unparalleled wisdom, wealth, and a magnificent kingdom at its zenith. According to the Bible, the queen heard about the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, and came to test him with hard questions. One can picture her arriving at the gates of Jerusalem with a very great retinue, with camels bearing spices, very much gold and precious stones. The air would have been heavy with the perfume of frankincense and myrrh, as she brought large quantities of incense and spice, so much that the Bible marvels, never again came such an abundance of spices as she gave to Solomon. Her motivation for this arduous journey has been subject to many interpretations. The biblical text emphasizes her desire for wisdom. She came to probe Solomon's knowledge with riddles. Indeed, the queen's intelligence and curiosity shine through. Only a highly educated ruler would dare pose challenging enigmas to Israel's wisest king. But practical goals likely underlay the visit as well. Sheba's kingdom controlled lucrative trade routes. Solomon's Israel sat at the crossroads of Africa, Arabia, and the Mediterranean. Modern historians suggest the visit may have doubled as a trade mission, with the queen seeking commercial alliances or negotiating trade rights. Solomon had built a fleet on the Red Sea and was eyeing the incense and spice trade that Saba monopolized. Cooperation, or at least mutual understanding, would benefit both empires. Others see hints of a political alliance or diplomatic exchange. In any case, the queen's arrival was not only an intellectual pursuit. It was a meeting of two world powers of the day, each curious about the other. When the Queen of Sheba finally stood before King Solomon, the scene would have been one of opulent splendor. Solomon's palace and the recently built temple dazzled visitors with cedar wood, gold, and carved stone. Yet this queen was not easily overawed. She posed her riddles and questions to Solomon, testing the depth of his wisdom. Though the Bible doesn't record the specific riddles, later traditions imagine puzzles about everything from the nature of God to subtle matters of science and love. Solomon answered them all with ease, and in doing so, proved that his legendary wisdom was real. The queen, initially skeptical of Solomon's greatness, found reality exceeded the rumors. "I did not believe it until I came and saw with my own eyes," she exclaimed. "And behold, the half was not told me. Your wisdom and prosperity surpassed the report I heard." Impressed beyond measure, the Queen of Sheba proceeded to present Solomon with gifts of staggering value. The Bible inventories 120 talents of gold, by some estimates over 4 metric tons of gold, worth roughly $364 million in today's terms. She gave him spices in such great quantity that the Israelites had never seen such bounty before. Exotic jewels and precious stones were heaped in Solomon's treasury. Each gift carried symbolic weight: gold for kingship and wealth, spices, frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, for divine incense and luxury, gems as tokens of wisdom and beauty. In return, Solomon lavished the queen with gifts from his side. Whatever she asked for, he provided, be it rare foods, textiles, or curiosities. The encounter was a meeting of equals in generosity, a kind of diplomatic gift exchange that sealed their mutual respect. There is an undercurrent of wonder, and perhaps even romantic tension, in later retellings of this meeting. Though the Bible is relatively restrained, it does not suggest any romance explicitly. The sheer drama of a wise, beautiful queen visiting a brilliant, wealthy king has ignited imaginations for centuries. Some later accounts, like Ethiopian tradition, hint at love. Solomon is often portrayed as enchanted by Sheba's beauty and wit, and in Ethiopian lore their union produces a child. But in the biblical narrative, after a period of sharing wisdom and wealth, the Queen of Sheba simply departs. She turned and went to her own country, she and her servants. 1 Kings 10:13. This somewhat abrupt ending only heightens the mystery, leaving us to wonder what truly passed between Solomon and Sheba during those fabled days. Soundtrack: a gentle, reflective harp music plays. Visual: the Queen's caravan departing Jerusalem at sunset, Solomon watching from his palace steps as the dust on the horizon settles. The historical context: ruins of the ancient Sabaean civilization, the pillars of the barren temple, Temple of the Sun, in Marib, Yemen, popularly known as Arash Bilqis, or Throne of Bilqis, Queen of Sheba. These ruins date back to the 8th century BCE, evidence of a wealthy kingdom that could be the Sheba of legend. To truly appreciate the Queen of Sheba's story, we must place it in the rich tapestry of the ancient Near East. Around the 10th century BCE, the era traditionally associated with King Solomon, the world was a mosaic of rising kingdoms and bustling trade routes. Israel under Solomon was a regional power in Canaan, enjoying peace and prosperity between the empires of Egypt and Mesopotamia. Far to the south, the kingdom of Saba, Sheba in South Arabia, was flourishing, thanks to its control of the lucrative caravan routes that transported incense, spices, gold, and exotic goods from Arabia and East Africa to the Mediterranean world. These trade routes, sometimes called the Incense Road, were the Silk Road of antiquity for frankincense and myrrh, highly prized in temples and royal courts. It's no wonder that the Bible specifically mentions spices among the queen's gifts. Sheba was likely the source of such aromatics, grown in the Yemeni highlands and Somali coast and traded northward. What was Sheba, Saba, like? Archaeology gives us tantalizing glimpses. Saba is mentioned in Assyrian inscriptions by the 8th century BCE, and Arab tradition spoke of its great wealth. In the 19th century, explorers excavated Ma'rib, uncovering a sophisticated civilization. They found the ruins of grand temples and a monumental dam. Ma'rib's dam, built perhaps around the 8th or 7th century BCE, was an engineering marvel that irrigated the desert, enabling the agriculture that underpinned Saba's wealth. Temples like the Awam Temple, Mahram Bilqis, a sanctuary dedicated to the moon god Almaka, have been excavated near Ma'rib. Local folklore dubbed these ruins the Palace or Throne of Bilqis, linking them to the legendary queen, though no inscriptions explicitly name her. We do know that Sabaeans had queens in their mythology or governance structure. The term Mekutwet in Sabaean inscriptions might refer to a high queen or priestess, and Assyrian records elsewhere mention Arab queens. However, so far no inscription has been found that directly mentions a Queen of Sheba herself. This isn't surprising given how scant written records from that era can be, or her story was likely preserved in oral tradition and later texts, rather than carved in stone. Meanwhile, across the Red Sea in the Horn of Africa, a parallel story was taking shape. South Arabian influence spread to the African side, and by the early 1st millennium BCE, Sabaean traders or colonists were present in what is now Eritrea and northern Ethiopia. They brought South Arabian script and possibly elements of their culture. Over centuries, an African kingdom, DMT or a precursor to Aksum, might have arisen with ties to Saba. By the time of the Aksumite Empire, which rose around the turn of the Common Era, the region had its own high civilization and later embraced Christianity. It was in the Ethiopian highlands that the tale of Solomon and Sheba would be preserved with a unique twist. The idea that the queen was an Ethiopian queen who bore Solomon's son. The Kebra Nagast, a 14th century Ethiopian national epic, cemented this narrative, claiming the Solomonic dynasty of Ethiopia descended from King Solomon and Queen Makeda. This legend provided a divine legitimacy to Ethiopia's emperors, linking their lineage to the biblical House of David. Beyond Israel, Saba, and Ethiopia, the Queen of Sheba appears in multiple cultural texts that give context to her character. The Quran, Islam's holy book 7th century CE, contains a detailed version of her story in Surah 27, An-Naml. In the Quranic account, it is Solomon, Suleiman, who first learns of the queen through the report of a hoopoe bird, and she is depicted as ruling a mighty kingdom but worshipping the sun. Solomon, endowed with the power to speak to animals and command spirits, invites her to forsake idol worship and submit to the one God. This account, likely drawing from earlier Jewish and Arabian folklore, adds supernatural flair. Solomon's jinn, genies, transport Bilqis's throne in the blink of an eye to Jerusalem to impress her. When the queen arrives, she is astonished by Solomon's wisdom and power. The Quran describes her ultimately declaring faith in Solomon's God after a famous incident in which she mistakes the king's glass floor for water and uncovers her legs, realizing the truth only after Solomon corrects her. This tale emphasizes themes of monotheism triumphing over paganism and presents the queen as a wise ruler who can recognize truth when confronted with it. Ancient Jewish legends also embellish the meeting. The Targum Sheni, an Aramaic commentary around 7th to 8th century CE, and later Midrash elaborate on the brief biblical story, turning it into a rich saga of magic and wit. In these tales, Solomon's pride is piqued by hearing of a great queen not under his dominion, prompting him to exchange riddling letters with her. They portray the queen as clever and sometimes trickster-like, proposing riddles that even challenge Solomon's insight into typically feminine knowledge. One Midrashic legend suggests that Solomon secretly fathered a son with her who grew up to be Nebuchadnezzar, the very Babylonian king who would later destroy Solomon's temple. A fanciful attempt to link Sheba's story to later Jewish history as a moral tale. While not historically credible, such stories show how deeply ingrained the Queen of Sheba became in the imagination of the region, evolving with each retelling to suit the values and questions of the time. Historically, the geopolitical climate of Solomon and Sheba's era was one of emerging international connections. If Solomon reigned in the 10th century BCE, he likely oversaw trade with distant lands like Ophir, possibly East Africa or India, and had dealings with Phoenician merchants, Arabian caravans, and Egyptian pharaohs. Sheba's visit, if it truly occurred, would exemplify the kind of international diplomacy and commerce that was beginning to connect far-flung cultures. It's intriguing to note that Assyrian records a century or two later mention Arab queens such as Zabibe and Samsi, leading tribes in the Arabian deserts. So the notion of a powerful queen in Arabia in Solomon's time is not far-fetched, even if we lack her name in the records. Thus, the Queen of Sheba's tale sits at the intersection of history and legend. The context of a wise king and a wealthy queen meeting fits the historical background of an expanding trade network between the Near East and Arabia. The details, riddles, magic carpets of spices, hidden paternity belong to the realm of story, growing,